complain.
being
And so
judged.
them to sue is stupid anyway. But it does show, if it's true, just how coarse and mean and crass we're getting in these judging shows.
Yeah, no, I mean, it can be. Like, it's not the Gong Show. We thought Gong Show years ago, before Michael was born. We thought sorry,
It's
Michael.
been back with Mike Myers.
But we thought the Gong Show was really mean. It's not even close. Not even close compared to what we're dealing with right now. Maybe that's what we should talk about next week, about how, like, really mean we are, because we've gotten desensitized to it. Don't you think?
Yeah.
We've kind of, like, gotten really, really cruel about things, and I am included in that. I'm totally, like, throwing myself under the bus right now about that. So, we should check this out. See, like, Tyra Banks versus, I don't know, the poor demoralized child whose parents were singing about her. I might be demoralized if my parents are singing about me. They're kind of cruel about me anyway. Well, as I said to my choir last night, my mother said I'm going straight to hell, and I told them that I didn't want to disappoint her. So, we have some cruelty issues.
Wow. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you hear the show claiming that you sign up to be mocked, and I mean, yes, that's true, but there's a huge difference between the judges mocking your singing ability and being told that your parents didn't actually want to give birth to you. Like, that's verbal
Michael,
abuse at
no
that
kidding.
point.
You're absolutely right. As far as I'm concerned, that's like lower than low. That's like like, seriously, like, you didn't have even God's, like, decision in this process. There's no God design in this, speaking of Stephen Hawking. So
yeah, that's actually a nice segue, Tanya. Speaking of Stephen Hawking, he one of the great scientists of our time. He passed away yesterday at the age of looks like 76. Tanya, you had some interesting thoughts about Hawking that you were mentioning just before the show. Can you reiterate some of those?
Well, I mean, he was kind of a contradictory person of himself, because he believed in the great design, but he believed that God was not necessary. And so when you mentioned how, there's a difference between, judging someone on their talent on a talent show versus their existence, you're just an accident of biology. It kind of recalls to that whole, question, are we here by accidental biology science, or is there a grand designer in this design in the nature of the world? So that's what I was fascinated by. I was like, wow, you like actually said something that was sort of like called back to the beginning of the show about Stephen Hawking and his passing. So yeah, I mean, like, you're right. Like, as far as I'm concerned, you're right that he, if Tyra Banks really, like, called her an accident in relationship to her parents singing a song that she didn't appreciate about the daughter on the show of America's Got Talent, that's kind of a low thing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, an interesting thing with Stephen Hawking is, yes, he was an atheist, but I have the utmost respect for any atheist who challenges themselves and tries to seek the truth.
Right.
And no one worked harder to try to figure out what does it all mean and how does this world work? How's this world work? No one tried harder to figure that out than him. Because I mean, it's one thing to be an atheist and just be like, I don't know, I don't really feel like thinking about it. But I mean, he came to that conclusion by actually putting the work in and challenging himself and researching it. And so that's the kind of person, like, even if I'm a Catholic and you're an atheist, like, I can get along with, I'll hang out with that person any day of the week, twice on Sunday.
Right. No, I agree. And the thing is that what's interesting is that, I heard this on the Glenn Beck show because it got up way too early in the morning, but he actually was saying, he was willing to say he was wrong. Why he was wrong, we may disagree with or we don't understand, but he was willing to say, I believe this, and I strongly believe it, and then he would turn around and say, I don't believe it. And in terms of even Catholic teaching, and I agree with this, so it's also my belief, but if a person follows what their soul, and in an atheist mind, maybe just their intellect, but I think it's beyond their intellect. If they follow that completely, then they are a good moral person. And because they are actually following God, they just don't know they're following God, and they don't believe they're following God. But if they're really following who they are, that God image is imprinted on their soul, and they're following that. If they're not following who they are, then whether they're atheist or not, then that's the problem. It has nothing to do with whether they believe in God or not. It's whether they're following what's in their heart and their soul and what God created. The fact that they don't believe that God created that is not as relevant as or as important as the fact that they are being true to themselves, like you said. So I totally, that was what's interesting about Stephen Hawking, is that he adamantly believed there was no God, but at the same time he believed there was a great design. And so I feel like he was kind of like still struggling with that, even up to his death of 76 just a few days ago. So that kind of made an impression on people from multiple backgrounds, I think, and that's what made him such a popular icon, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in the world who see science and religion as being incompatible. And right. I don't agree with that at all. I actually think it's almost essential to look at the two of them together. I remember when I was in high school, I went to a Catholic high school. My freshman biology teacher, she had this poster up on the wall. It's a quote from Albert Einstein. I'm going to pull it up here to make sure I get it exactly right. So Albert Einstein said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." And we also talked a lot in that class about how people say like, "Oh, well, how could you can't believe in God and also believe in evolution?" And actually, the Pope John Paul himself, he said, "No, that's not true. Like, the church doesn't have a problem with evolution. They're not mutually exclusive beliefs." And so I'm a big advocate of trying to find your own information and research how things work in the world and how it all came together. But it's okay to seek out information and then believe that there's an intelligent design behind it all.
Right. And that's the thing, intelligent design is the teaching of the church. Is like, you can come up with all these theories of like the biological, chemical, physical mechanics of things, but ultimately, if you look at statistically, whether you look at mathematics, physics, or biology or biochemistry, statistically, it doesn't make any sense. If you just think of the Big Bang Theory, it's not even logical that you would have the number of and frequency of a species as we do on a statistical level. And so statistically, it speaks of some kind of intervention of some sort where there is a direction to the randomness. And that's what, when I was going through, because I have a degree in biology, so I have, here's this staunch Catholic nerd chick who goes into biology, and she's like confronted with mostly atheist or agnostic professors in a Catholic university college, and two different ones, by the way. But the fact that, you look at Albert Einstein, who says you can't possibly look at the cosmos and mathematics without thinking there has to be a God behind it. Yeah. And it took him a while to get to that point. I think Stephen Hawking, as much as he was brilliant, never got to that point. I think he's got to that point, in my opinion, now. Like after his death, I'm kind of like, well, there you got it, sir. You got your final answer.
It could be, it could be. Yeah, and for me, when I look at the world, if you're sitting on a train and the train stops suddenly, and the momentum takes you forward, that's science and that's physics. But for me, the fact that I met my roommate 5 years ago, we moved to the city at the same time, found each other through our families connecting us because we were both from Boston, and then 5 years later, he's one of my best friends in the whole world. Mm-hmm. Like that's, that to me, like when things like that happen in my life on an interpersonal level, I think like, yes, there is science, there's very complicated cosmos, but there's got to be, at least I believe, there's got to be something more behind it all.
Yeah, because statistically speaking, that would be you'd be more likely to have won the lotto multiple times before that would have happened.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the same with, I used to look at, like, when I took genetics and development in undergrad, the likelihood of a conception was less likely than winning the lotto at any given day.
Yeah.
In California, any lotto that you picked, any lotto, you can pick any lotto, it was less likely to happen to have a conception than a lotto, and yet the conception happens more often than lottery winning. And that has to do with something that no one could pinpoint, no one could scientifically say was why, when the ovum was capable of killing the sperm because it had several membrane layers, why it chose certain ones. Who finally, the sperm that finally made it up the vaginal canal and through the fallopian tube, the one sperm that finally made it, she still, the ovum itself still had a choice to remember several layers of membrane and spermicidal, fluids within the cell. And that itself, no one could explain. 35 years ago and still now. And it was still a higher frequency than winning the freaking lotto. I know, because I buy the lotto ticket, and I don't have sex on regular basis. But even if I did, I'd still more likely to win the lotto than be pregnant, technically speaking, on a mathematical level.
Okay.
But, yeah. So there you go, Carl. Play the lotto. Don't try to get anyone pregnant. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's not on the agenda for my.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. That's one thing to mark off on my little calendar of to-do list. Okay, good.
Well, before we wrap up, we should hit one other thing that involves odds this week or this month. The March Madness is going on, and Michael, you noted how there's a couple prominent Catholic colleges vying for the championship.
Yeah, so I love basketball. I've loved it my whole life, and so this weekend is one of my favorite weekends of the whole year because it's down to 64 teams. It starts out with 68 on a Tuesday, but then we're recording this on a Thursday, and today's the first day of it. And you just see team after team battling each other, and it's so fun to watch. We've got 7 Catholic teams in the tournament this year. At least by my count. Some years I get someone's like, "Oh, did you know that Boise State is actually a Catholic school?" And sometimes you get surprised like that. But as far as I can count, there were 7. We got Villanova, Xavier, Seton Hall, Gonzaga, Providence, St. Bonaventure, and Loyola Chicago. An interesting thing is that Villanova and Xavier, they actually both got number 1 seeds. And so they both have, they're both really, really talented teams, deep teams, that have a really good chance of making it to the Final Four and even beyond that. So they're looking good right now. Seton Hall won their game today, so did Gonzaga. Providence is, they're a number 10 seed, but they've got some talent. They've got some really good guard play on their team. And, a lot of people think they could be a sneaky Sweet 16 pick. They'd have to beat North Carolina to do that, but I could maybe see it happening because they've got some moxie. They
have a deep seed on them at all? I haven't paid attention, but I'm just asking.
So Providence is a 10 seed in the West bracket. They're playing either Texas Tech or Texas A&M today. I forget which one. And then if they won that game, then it would be a big matchup against North Carolina.
Okay.
But Providence, I believe they actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think they either won the Big East tournament or made it to the finals. But they had a really good showing in the Big East tournament, so they're playing really good basketball at the right time.
So Texas A&M has been a long tradition, but Providence, do they have more than just a starter seat? Like, do they have like a good second string, or do you know?
I think they've got a decent amount of. They're not as deep as most teams, but their go-to guys can really play. And Loyola Chicago, actually, they won at the buzzer today. And one thing that's really fun to watch about them is that their mascot essentially is a nun who lives on campus. Her name's Sister Jean. She has sneakers with sister on the left sneaker stitched in, and then Jean on the right stitched in. She's kind of a celebrity.
No kidding.
Yeah, she's kind of a celebrity on campus. She's always at the games. Whenever they show her on the Jumbotron at home games, the place goes crazy. I believe there was a shot of her kind of praying with the team in a huddle. and they end up having this game that goes down to the wire against Miami today, and they win on a buzzer beater 3.